Right. So milestone technically ended yesterday, so we should probably run through what's on the board and take care of them. So let's CI minutes kind of.
I will do it asynchronously, these issues. I will move it to 13.1, so we would not waste our time. Sorry, I forgot it.
Oh, no worries. Josh, have you done anything with the blog post?
No, I'm sorry. I need to get that done. It's my fault. I will.
All right, I'll move it over. Let's see. Nicola, this one's probably going to carry over, right? It's 13.2. The push timing and GC
I think
measurements.
it's being deployed. If it says workflow production, I think that label is applied by the deployer pipeline.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that one, like, it doesn't require any more work or development work. I updated the information in the ticket, but I'm still waiting for those logs to be included in our ELK, or how it's called, like Kibana, Elasticsearch, and everything else.
I think we should call it done.
So I guess we can maybe close these ones, and that they're a separate issue to include.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, I didn't. Can you refresh the page? There is my comment in the end.
I just kicked it out, so.
Okay, perfect.
All right, closed it. So, all right, so this is the last one.
This is just enabling the feature flags for NDJSON. Like, the maintainer didn't respond for 4 days. I expect him to do it today. I pinged him, so I know if he doesn't respond today, I'll ping someone else to just merge.
So, Nicola, it's actually a problem because it's not gonna be on by default on premise. It's actually pretty bad that we didn't merge it by Friday. Because, like, even if we merge it today, it's very unlikely that it's gonna land in the 13.0.
What should we do?
I don't know.
Can you pick it into the next hot patch? I mean, honestly, like we shoot after the minor increments so quickly after the initial release. I wonder how many customers actually install a 0.0 release anyway, because most of the customers probably wait for it.
It's like, but like it's not about that like we cannot pick that. We can pick that, but like it's breaking chance. It's difference in the behavior. We shouldn't pick that for the patch release.
Right.
Oh,
right, because it's a major. Of course, yeah, it's a major release. I mean,
can you give me 3.1 C01?
You got it, Camille.
It's also pretty far behind. Oh gosh. Okay, I don't know what's gonna happen with that, but we may miss the date.
That's a bummer.
Did 13.0 happen over the weekend, or did they push it back till today?
It's not about like did it happen. Like at some point we freeze on picking the new changes, and it happens around 18th. So like we just give ourselves a few days to like to stabilize, like to ensure that everything is stable. Okay, I click MVPS on this merge request. Let's see if it's gonna be merged. I'm gonna ask like the delivery channel what is the latest change that is gonna land. Is it enabled on GitLab.com, right, Nicola?
What?
Sorry, like it's okay. Export
is disabled, but I didn't enable anything. I just disabled the export feature flag.
Okay, so import is not enabled either, right?
It's not.
Did you test that, like on the exporting side, on like enabling feature flag on some namespace? To ensure
On
that it's
production,
stable?
no. I did like detailed testing on staging, but on production, I didn't try to export manually.
Can you try that?
Yeah, sure. I can enable for
So-
some namespace and try before we
Please
enable.
ensure that it works properly.
Mhm.
Okay, please ensure that it works properly, and please write a message on the memory channel
Mhm.
after doing that. Thank you.
I think, are you muted, Craig? Are you talking?
Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't sure if it's my setup.
Maybe it is too early. All right. One thing that we talked about last week was bringing back the memory team workflow board and making sure we use that throughout the milestone. So I put it back together. What are folks' thoughts on, do we want to use this, and how do we want to review and make sure it's up to date? So first question, do we want to bring this back?
I mean, I don't
I
know.
think
like
we
if
should.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think we should ask you, Craig and Josh, because for us, I think developers, we pretty much know what we are working on and what is the state of our issue. So for me, I don't need it because I know my issues and what is their state. So go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, I started at some point like attaching the workflow labels that are a bit more specific than is it in development or done. But I stopped doing it at some point because like these lanes were also always empty, like scheduling and problem validation, and so I just stopped doing it. But like if it's valuable to someone, I'm happy to do that properly again, because right now I'm only really using dev, maybe in review, and closed. Pretty much.
All right. Anybody else? Camille, Nicola, you have any strong opinions on this?
Sorry, on what? I was lost the topic.
The workflow board and usage for us. I saw Nicola shaking his head, so.
Yeah, I also only use like in dev, ready for review, and maybe it's on staging or production if needed for testing.
Okay.
That's it.
I mean, just out of curiosity, is there anything that is derived from the number of issues that have a particular label for a particular time or duration or something like that? Or is it really just for us?
Really just for us. I mean, if you were doing like a Kanban workflow, then you'd want to set column limits and stuff, but we're not doing that. This is just another view, right? And if nobody finds any value in it, then I'll keep it around for curiosity for me, but we won't use it as part of our weekly review.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. And then we talked about during the planning discussion, just instead of going through issue by issue, doing progress by person or point pairs. Since this is the first time we're going to do it this way, how do we want to do it? Do we want to go, in past, I've just gone through alphabetically. So we're always going through the same order of people, and then that'll kind of bundle up individual efforts and point pairs. But if someone has a different idea how we can go through it, I'm open to ideas. If not, if we go with alphabetic, then Alexi's going to be first.
Yeah, as I put in the next section, I have 3 stories I'm working on. Like I would like to highlight, there is a small jQuery security scan issue. We just closing it with Chinyu, I believe, and close it soon. Just wanted to give you a heads up. It's not related to our memory work directly.
Yep.
Then there is this user journeys story, and I put my summary in the notes, and I would like you, team, to check it if you have some time, because it's really, I think, close to what we discussed about our benchmarking. If you want to measure some numbers on real.com website, or are we okay with synthetic testing? And I'm still on the fence about this. And I think depending on this, our next step is also would be like resolved. So yeah, I would need your input on this if you have some time. And Josh and Craig, please also review it.
Yeah, one quick note is that in talking with Mech, we can actually run the quality engineering and then tests on GitLab.com. So those should be safe tests. But I agree, if we would want to run this on .com and not on some staging or test instance.
Yes, and to move to the next story, it's CI Minutes. I was working on it with Camille for some time, and I just wanted to give you an update that it was closed as rapid action and we moved rollout to later date. So I have a bunch of issues. I moved to 13.1. Probably they will be moved to 13.2, depending on where we are going to roll out these switch flags. That's it.
Yeah, and we'll have our last meeting on rapid actions on Thursday.
Okay.
So do you have work lined up for 13.1? Or are you waiting for feedback from Josh and I on prioritization?
No, I want some feedback on user journeys, and depending on this, I may take something else as well. So it would need some more work on having a workload.
Okay. All right, Camille, you've got a comment here.
Nothing really interesting. I started testing of the direct download of artifacts on our repos, among other things that I'm like being involved with. It works. Sorry, it works. So
All right, Matthias, you're up then.
Yep. I'll do it for Chinyu and myself because we're both working on the telemetry topic.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm kind of like just knee deep into trying to understand how our Prometheus setup works and how we would. It's not just about like how to access this data, like more about like under what circumstances is it available and in what form or shape. Because like Josh found an interesting problem that I wasn't aware of, that I was kind of like mostly looking at like what data is in our production Prometheus, but not all of that might be on like a random on-prem omnibus deployment. For instance, like the labels might change. So there's a bunch of things we still need to clarify, and also under what circumstances we can rely on like the internal Prometheus and where to reach it. So there's still a lot of questions to figure out, but I want to get my hands dirty as well. So what I've done is wrote a simple API wrapper for the Prometheus API Ruby client, which is just like this gem that you can use to if you know how to locate a Prometheus server, you can just query it and it gives you back JSON, pretty much like what the web front end does. So that's what I'm working on right now. There's a work in progress MR. Yeah, we're still like one of my biggest like gray areas here, like where I'm like still fuzzy on is what like how this data is ingested. Like I mean, I looked at the data team page, so thanks Josh for the pointer, but there's a lot of stuff on there, and I don't want to spend a week like trying to understand in every detail like how that works, operates. I think that's maybe not super efficient. So my suggestion was to get like, I don't know what team it would be, if it's what's the team name? Is not telemetry, but sorry, monitoring, is it right? If it's monitoring or if it's the data team, because there's the data team as well, right? I think it would be good to get some help from them to understand how this data is processed, because otherwise it's really hard to say like what we should even track, if that makes sense.
So is your question like how to like how to store data with usage ping, or
No, it's like literally about the data model. Like we need to know what to track and in what form, you know. Is it a counter, and like what counter would it be? If we don't understand how it's aggregated, we don't know if it's going to be able to answer the questions that we are asking, right? Which is like how many users run a 10K architecture, for instance, right? So that might not always be possible. Like if I look at this version.gitlab.com, versions.gitlab.com metrics endpoint, that's all just global counters. Like it tells you pretty much, oh, like there were, I don't know, like 4 billion commits across all our customers or something like that. But that's not useful for us if we count the number of Puma nodes that in aggregate run across all on-prem installations. That we would not be able to do anything meaningful with that number. So I think we need to understand a bit better, like what we should track and how can we crunch that data along the way to end up with some sort of dashboard that will actually tell us what we're after. And that's like something I'm struggling with right now a bit.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So I can help there. Basically, just real quick, how it works is the usage ping gets set up every week from the GitLab node, and then it just overwrites what's already there. And so there's a unique identifier, and that goes up along with the data. And so you might report back that, you know, this deployment looks like a 10K reference architecture, or it's similar to it. And so you might, you know, send a 10K, you know, true flag or something like that. And then the backend side data team can just aggregate across, you know, and do how many reference architectures do we have deployed across the 5K, 10K, 25K, et cetera, and then just like count them. That's just a really quick example, but that's generally how it works.
So from what you say, my understanding would be that we then aggregate on the client side before we push the data, rather than we push raw metrics that would be aggregated in the data pipeline.
Yeah, so generally you want to push aggregated data from the node, because you're going to get one. Okay. You're going to get one field. Generally, you're going to get one field for every weekly ping.
Okay. Yep. Right. That's the two approaches I outlined. I wasn't sure which one we wanted to take, because the drawback of this is that we kind of lose a lot of optionality in terms of basically if you collapse data up front before your data warehouse, then you lose a lot of signal, right? I mean, because if we were able to submit really just counters, and we were able to have like a batch job that like aggregates all these groups of metrics that we send, that would give us maybe more kind of options in the future for how to look at that data. But I mean, we can also just start simple and aggregate on the client side for now. And
what does mean aggregate in this context?
Say it again.
What does mean aggregate in this context?
So basically the question was, how many users do we have that run like a 1K architecture, 5K, 10K, and so forth? And the idea was, the way to find this out was to count number of nodes that they have for a certain component, like, oh, they run like 5 Puma nodes or whatever, like 1 cache node and so forth. And then the question was, do we aggregate this in the app itself as part of the usage ping, like where we would go to the local Prometheus, then we would count, give me all, like, count the number of metrics we emit that are for Puma nodes, for instance. So we would know like how many Puma nodes they have. And then we sort them into these reference architecture buckets before we even submit the usage data. Or the other approach would be to send the raw data, which would be, oh, here's a customer who runs 50 Puma nodes, and we just send that count. And then somewhere on the data pipeline on our end, we would then create this clustering. So that was my question, like which way we prefer.
So I think it's not about aggregation, but rather what you're mentioning is about the categorization, which is
yes, but it can happen on like two different ends. Either we categorize up front, but then we lose the raw data, right? Because it will never arrive.
Like raw data for me would be that like we send from each node individually. Aggregated means that we like, for example, sum amount of the nodes and amount of the CPUs, and then there is like the third item, which is we categorize this data from the aggregates, because like aggregates also gives you, if you know how amount of the CPUs versus amount of the threads, amount of the nodes, you kind of understand how big topology you are running. So I think it's not about the aggregation, it's about whether we should categorize or not, whether we should categorize to the given buckets that are prescribed.
Well, I think so, right? Because correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but that was the main question, right? It's to collapse all this data into buckets so that we know how, then we can count in these buckets basically. So how many, what is the distribution of users between all these HA architectures or like single node deployments and stuff?
Yeah, and I think in this case, it probably does make sense to send the raw data up. Well, not the, it depends on what you define as raw, but send the number of each type of nodes up. And so you can certainly send like a JSON blob. A number of places do that, and then the backend can deal with it. And that way we can update or refine or update our logic on the backend side for this.
Right, but that will only work if, and that might be true, I just don't know at this point, that will only work if we, if that data remains an atomic unit in the pipeline, right? Because if we all throw these into big counters that are mixed up with the other customer data, then we will only get these global figures. At least that's what I'm currently seeing on this metrics endpoint on versions, right? It will tell me how many commits have there been across all on-prem GitLab deployments, right? But these are like global counters basically. So, and then you lose. I posted an example in the issue, but it's basically like you don't know anymore like how to associate the individual data points to each other, because you're like removing all these lines between which customer they came from. And you need more than one data point, right? More than one metric to decide in which reference architecture bucket they fall. You can't just look at only Puma nodes, or because it's a combination of things. Like there was even one case where it's even the same topology, like 3K and 5K, I think, is the exact same topology. The only differentiator is like the machine requirements we set, right? So yeah, I don't know, it's tricky.
You should probably take it to the issue, but I appreciate it.
There is,
but yeah, I don't know, like maybe we can just have the data person look at it and say, does it make sense or not? Give a recommendation.
So, Matthias, there is one aspect to also look at. The buckets is our representation of right now. These buckets can change over time when we refine them, and how it's gonna basically like survive the time. If we refine buckets, if we, for example, add new buckets, because like from one angle it's like hard coding buckets on the client side, from the other angle it's like consuming data on the other side, where you have flexibility to adapt your metric.
Yes, that's why I would be in favor of not pre-aggregating data, but it's also harder to do that, or at least we would need more help from, because if we start writing ETL jobs, I'm happy to do that, but I know nothing about this pipeline. It would take me probably a week to like get into that as well. It would just make this either bigger, this epic, or we need some help from data team to figure that out.
The data team writes the ETLs.
Right, okay. So maybe we can just have someone like help us out with this issue and look into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's kind of where we are right now. Oh, like I told Chinyu, maybe because he was actually owning the topology story, but I think he was struggling still a bit with like just the basic Prometheus stuff. So he was still looking into that. So I suggested maybe we can switch, that he takes on the memory aspect, because there's a bunch of work we can do without Prometheus, because that's just like what the Ruby sampler does as well. You can just look at our systems module and we'll have that data available and use that as a usage ping. But yeah, we can figure that out among ourselves.
All right, thanks. Nicola?
Yeah, I just opened MR to add the database calls to our logs and metrics. It should actually add read and write number of SQL calls and only database calls that are like select queries, and also it should log the cached queries as well. So I guess this is something that will be helpful in detecting, I don't know, n+1 queries, and actually we will benefit from it for sure. So I open it MR and hope to get some feedback if I'm on right track. I also asked database team and Camille to take a look to see if this makes sense. Besides that, I'm still like analyzing data for CI atomic processing. We enabled it on production for everybody last Thursday. On Friday, we need to close it because there are some reports that that there is an open issue currently that we are investigating, but I analyzed the data still because we had almost the whole day enabled, and the results are really great. Like we have 2 or 3 times faster times than before, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And beside that, I was working on this service measurement, and at the moment it's deployed on staging and production. I introduced some way to really easy to enable this measurement to any of our services. So I plan to like get documentation how to enable it, and I hope to enable it on staging and test it with our CA job. At the moment we're a little bit blocked because I introduced this new log file, and this new log file needs to be injected in Elasticsearch into Kibana, so it will be picked up. And in order to have those metrics available, and I hope that when this is done, I also think that it will work for export. I think the Java told me that it will work for export without injecting, so I can try and see if it's there. So we can connect it with our CA job for import export and like track data in Kibana. And then afterwards, we can probably hand it over to group import team. And like next step, I'm trying, I will take a look, is this issue, performance issue for projects blame control that is assigned to me. So I will start looking at it. I didn't have a chance to look into much details, but this is some next that I will pick up. So yeah, that's it.
All right. As far as any current work, are there any other topics we need to cover? Grant, is there anything you need from the team?
No. I'm keeping an eye from afar. Always consistently impressed with the work being done. But if anyone needs any kind of input or the quad planning stuff, which doesn't really apply to this team, but if there's any new features or anything else going to be added, then give me a shout. Yeah.
All right. Okay, unless there's any other topics folks want to cover, we can jump over to the memory team roadmap doc, since we haven't actually spent any time talking about that. So I put this together. I've used similar formats in the past, or tools like Jira has a pretty good built-in road mapping. Hopefully none of this is a surprise. And Josh, you can feel free to correct me if I got the priorities in the wrong order. So telemetry is at the top of the priority order right now. Got the triaging non-performant endpoints, and we've added a few in there. The ones that Nicola is working on have been added in there, and there's a couple listed below that I can add as well. There's some individual issues that have been called out that would have either a big memory or performance impact that are listed here. So live tracing and Rails boot time. Front-end performance improvements, that's something that was brought up during our OKRs. We don't actually have anything identified. I think there was a random example called out by Camille. I can't remember which page it was. But ultimately, if that's not something we feel we can contribute to or can't find issues to, we'll end up either rewriting or just removing that KR altogether. But we need to spend some time. We can spend some time taking a look at that, see if there's any major memory or performance impacts we can have on the front end.
I can comment a little bit on that if you want.
Sure.
Our visibility to front end performance isn't as good as I'd like it to be. We're going to we've had a few instances over the last few weeks. Along with that survey that Josh brought up, we've had at least some comments on Hacker News or a competitor actually putting up a comparison website, which doesn't paint us in a good light. I've been deep diving into those recently. And I found a few kind of gotchas there, like the comparison test that I mentioned ran at a very low bandwidth, for example, which really benefited the competitor, but not us because our pages are just doing a lot more. But nonetheless, there are rendering issues, obviously, with GitLab, and so the quality team is going to try and prioritize a kind of a site speed pipeline, like we do with K6. Now that we have K6 in place, we can now comfortably look at the rendering performance and say, okay, well, that's taking so long because the server's taking longer, but then there's also X time spent in the browser. So at the moment, we've not got too much visibility in that, but we are prioritizing that. It's going to be coming up hopefully sooner rather than later. But off the top of my head, certainly the areas that we'd be keen to look at would be merge requests. Off the top of my head, those are pretty bad. Large files in the browser also generally bad. If you guys are really struggling trying to find places, give me a shout and I can at least try and cook up a list of at least anecdotal areas that we know are bad in the browser.
Front, like jobs trace view, it's pretty bad. It's super slow. It's also like very memory heavy. Like right now loading the trace, it's like you click a link and you spend like 15 minutes before you see anything.
Yeah.
So
What we seem to keep finding little bits like this. Generally across the board, GitLab is doing good things when it comes to performance, but sometimes we hit across things that have just not been designed with performance in mind at all. Last week with the comparison site, we realized that the blame functionality was entirely bad, and that's mostly on the server side, but also on the rendering side as well. We're going to see it's so bad at the moment that we're just waiting for the server side to be improved first, and then we'll see how that affects the rendering side. But just like anything that's heavy, like job traces as well, that's a very heavy page. I think audits are pretty bad as well. I don't think that's paginated, so I think at scale that's going to be quite bad. So anything we're just looking for anything that it's a classic kind of this isn't paginated. It's going to load in 10,000 items, for example, in a non-intelligent way. So stuff like that, yeah.
Do we even have like any library or whatever that would track like I don't know memory usage or performance of the loaded pages in JavaScript? Because like it's very easy like to see like memory usage or like latency of the backend request, but do we have any visibility into front end? And maybe this KR is like front-end performance improvements is actually integrating something that would give us the visibility into front-end. So we could start populating data.
Yeah, with SiteSpeed, as long as SiteSpeed exposes that data for us, yes, that obviously would be very useful to have. And the benefit with SiteSpeed is that its rendering performance is bizarrely easier compared to server performance because everything's all local. So with SiteSpeed, I truly hope that it can expose. I'm almost confident it can give us the data that says this page took up X memory, and I'd like to hope it can break it down to because it's running Chrome, so it should be able to extrapolate those numbers about JavaScript, how much JavaScript there is, what size it is. I have seen a little bit of things, I think, because obviously performance is a big focus at the moment. I think there's a big epic bit now about tracking performance. I'm sure I've seen a few comments here and there about trying to reduce JavaScript size, but again, this is why we're prioritizing our pipeline because we don't have like a unified kind of pipeline that says here's a list of pages that we know are bad. or just or common even, which would be the target, and then would have hopefully a concise output that says, this is speed index, this is the time to first byte, and then would also have memory and other relevant bits. So yeah, we'll certainly, that's a good idea. We'll make sure that's highlighted.
I was thinking maybe like one of the ways to approach that is like maybe like getting one of these examples when we know that it's badly performing. Like, I don't know, job stress. This is like one that is on top of my head because I use that pretty frequently.
Yep.
And trying to see exactly what it takes to optimize that, to actually get some initial feeling. How complex is that? What competencies we miss? How to measure that and things like that.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's random idea really. Like
no, it's a good idea.
Maybe it's like taking like the example that we know of and trying to see what it takes to like optimize that.
So SciSpeed comes with a thing called Coach, which is it will try to give recommendations of how to improve the performance of the page. Obviously, it's only an attempt; it might not actually be correct, but it will at least. Obviously, if there's anything that's like an obvious red flag, like your JavaScript's massive, it's never going to perform well unless you dramatically improve it. That kind of thing will be in its output. That would be quite. We'll have the artifacts on our pipeline, and you'll be able to get the full report for that. So again, that should be made available. So you should at least have some guidance.
I have a couple of questions. Do we use SciSpeed anywhere in our current QA pipelines, or
there's a pipeline that runs?
Or is it just planned for user journeys, as we mentioned it? Because I mean, you mentioned SciSpeed, but do we use it somewhere?
It's been used against .com. I don't know who actually
but
set
manually,
up.
Right? It's not like in a tool or something. We just manually spin analysis.
There is some automated. There is some automated tests being run. Again, the output gets put to Slack, which I monitor every so often. But it's not very useful. SciSpeed's output is not very useful in its native form. The task is to massage that data into a way that is useful, like say like a table, like we get with our current server tests. That's what we're hoping to do, and then that would be automated. Yeah.
Okay, but Craig, could you please like link this to our user journey stuff, because it seems like all of it connected, but I don't understand like what are we going to do in regarding to user journeys. There is no user journeys in this table, right?
I don't know. I was going to ask Grant the same thing. Like, what issues can we watch to study this, to get notifications of these things?
So yeah, we have the issue to build out the pipeline, which we'll be using to discuss this in more detail. These tests are going to be more of a kind of a big bang kind of gotcha at the end kind of deal. They won't necessarily be covering tests that should be run higher up in the test chain. That'll be up to the individual teams to do. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question directly. But
yeah, we should somehow connect this to like part of jobs. If we are going to use SciSpeed, for example, for North Star or all the single number metrics of performance, we could connect this kind of
I think
two issues.
Yeah, the difficulty I think is that there is the capability in the actual product to run SciSpeed as part of a part of an MR or that kind of thing. The problem with performance testing, and this is the same for other forms as well, is that the review apps don't have the data. They don't have the large files or other bits and bobs that you would really want to have to be able to do those tests. So there is some complexities there, but certainly as a V1, we're hoping to have like a kind of a big bang kind of pipeline at the end, so we can at least capture stuff before it gets released to say, hey, look, this page is actually degraded, or this page is just bad. And then we can certainly look at trying to make that more broken down into more smaller testing kind of higher up in the test chain.
Do you have an issue link that we can watch on this one, Grant? Thanks.
I'm just getting it there for you. I'll add it into the agenda.
I think I had a similar question to Alexi. Actually, Grant, which is that we're trying to A, collect this data, and B, surface it on like our North Star metrics page. So initially we're looking at site speed to collect more of this content, but Max pointed us to the existing end-to-end QA suite. But if this is underway for you and you're already using site speed, maybe it makes sense for us to have a quick chat as far as what you're doing here and what you're planning to actually measure, and because this might be also another avenue to get this data.
Yeah,
The goal here is to just try to surface this really, like the performance problems at the same level as other business driving features, like number of times that users completed this given action, right? Which is frankly becoming really important for a lot of business decisions around what features are being utilized and where we should invest.
Yeah, just my two concerns. Sorry,
No,
my first concern is that we didn't add it to this high-level Epic table by Craig. Like we need to add this user journey somehow, or is it present and I don't see it?
It's under telemetry.
I think it's a bit different. I mean, right?
So the individual issue was added under telemetry.
Okay,
Epic.
okay.
But if you want to separate it out, we certainly can. If that would make more sense.
And the second is like the current solution proposed by Mac and Quality is to measure against our CI pipelines, which is, I don't think if it's a good way to measure actual team performance in North Star, because we need to run versus com, I think, versus real data sets and real load, because otherwise we could just run pretty synthetic stuff, no?
I agree with you. I think it means running against .com. Grant, you might know more, but Mac mentioned that that these QA end-to-end tests can run against .com. The reason why Mac pointed there was that to try to make sure we reuse the existing test framework we have, and we're not maintaining something new.
Yes, there's a lot there. Sorry, just give me a sense to parse through it. The for North Star metrics, you're looking to collect data from customers. That's my kind of understanding of. I've not had the chance to deep dive into that yet.
Yeah.
That's obviously quite difficult with browser render performance testing, because you'll then need to implement a subsequent send from the browser to say this is actually how long it took. Site speed obviously isn't that. So for North Star, it looks like it needs to be a different solution that actually would be implemented into our actual product that says, hey, the JavaScript that says, hey, I actually took X to render, this is my memory usage, etc. So that's difficult. Server side, it's easier. Bizarrely, it's the inverse for us discussing earlier. It's harder for browser side than it is for server side. Server side, you've got the data there. You just need to extrapolate and send it. For running against.com, I need to see what Mech has said in detail. For performance testing, as a general rule, we don't do performance testing on .com for the very exact reason that .com is a live service. We've interrupted service once before, and we are very reticent to make sure that doesn't happen again. That being said, browser rendering performance is not as bad, and is not testing things at scale. It's just going to be rolling a single page, so that could be part of the test pipeline that we design. But when we're testing things at scale with test data, the data we are using is real. It's GitLab. It's GitLab's own source code. But there is always going to be a balance between synthetic and real data, kind of real testing, because we need to make this recreatable, we need to make it automatable, we need to keep it consistent and always have comparative benchmarks. So it's a balancing act in that regard. But yeah, for North Star, I don't know. That's something that we need to figure out. For our pipeline, it's just here as a kind of a quite a far down the chest chain kind of test of saying, hey, here's how GitLab's performing today on the latest nightly, and then filter that back up.
Okay, I think we can maybe pull you into the issue, Grant, if you don't mind, and we can discuss there.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss more. Yeah,
cool.
Yep. Just tag me.
Okay, I have to leave, but see if I can end. I'll see if I can leave without ending the meeting. So thanks, everybody.
I had one question. Just curious what your thoughts are on it. Like, so